welcome into another edition of the Hang Time Podcast. Sekou Smith here in Atlanta. My main man, John Schumann, is in New Jersey. John Hubs are behind the glass, as always. Shu, what's happening, sir? Crazy weekend around the NBA. Just over 3 weeks left in the regular season. And as always, the league never disappoints. The action wacky from coast to coast. I don't know if you got a chance to see it live, but certainly I'm sure you've seen the video, Shu, of Jeremy Lamb's March Madness bucket to lift the Hornets to a stunning win over Toronto on Sunday. The Hornets are 2 games behind Miami for the number 8 seed. And we're going to talk power rankings like we always do on Monday here on the Hang Time Podcast. But I can't help but wonder, Shu, how crazy the standings are going to get over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, I was watching that end of that game. I didn't watch that whole game, but I was watching the end. I think it may have coincided with my Hokies being at halftime or something on Sunday night.
Shout out to your Hokies, by the way.
Sweet 16.
The Wolverines do it basically every year. So, I mean, if you need a roadmap or...
No, I didn't realize you went to Michigan.
You always bring this up, like as if you have to be a card-carrying member. Like, I didn't realize you played for the Nets or the Grizzlies or whoever your favorite team. I mean, what a childish thing to say. Anyway.
But yeah, I think it's funny, like looking at, these teams at the fighting for the last 3 spots in the East. And, if Charlotte gets in by 1 game, that shot is the difference. If Miami gets in by 1 game, that Dwayne Wade game winner against the Warriors where he fumbled the ball and then just threw it up in the air.
2 absolutely 100% pure luck shots.
Yeah, is the difference. And if Brooklyn gets in by 1 game, coming back from 25 points down at the start of the fourth quarter in Sacramento last week is maybe the difference. And so there was that. Remember a few years ago, Pelicans made it in by 1 game, and the difference was an Anthony Davis 30-foot chuck at the buzzer, like in the middle of the season. He beat I forget who it was that they beat in that game, but it was the same team they basically beat out for the 8th spot in the West, and it was because Davis hit a 30-footer at the buzzer to win a game in the middle of the season.
It just goes to show every game matters.
Yeah, it means 82 games long, 1,230 games total, but every game, every possession, is can be the difference. Like any single last second shot and as random as they can be the difference between playoffs and no playoffs, or the difference in seeding. So it's you got to keep watching, I guess.
It all shakes out. The Indiana Pacers got a monstrous win over the Denver Nuggets on Sunday. I mean, just blew them out, 124-88. And that loss, drops Denver down to 2 in the West, after the Warriors get a win over the Pistons on Sunday. I mean, there's so much moving and shaking going on right now in the standings, and this is critical stuff. Denver's playoff hopes are dramatically different if they have the 1 seed as compared to if they're 2, in terms of what they might be capable of, what the path looks like, what you can...
Maybe. I think in the West, it's so, I don't know if there's not a clear 8 seed that you want in the first round, right? Like we don't know who the 8 seed's going to be. There's 4 teams basically within a half a game of each other for 5th to 8th.
Right, but I'm saying for a team like Denver that hasn't, I mean, they're going from not making the postseason to being a top 2 seed potentially.
Right.
There's no guarantee there's no guarantee that they're going to be free and clear no matter who they play, because
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't think it matters for them whether they get 1 or 2, because the Warriors are capable of winning.
Yeah, the Warriors can go from wherever they're at. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think it matters too much if Denver's 2 and has 2 home series, before they have to play the Warriors. I think that's not much different than them being the 1 seed.
I'm saying that they got to worry about getting out of the first round is what I'm saying.
Sure. But but we don't even know who 7 or 8 are going to be. It could be anybody. So, the difference between 1 and 2, who knows, if it's more beneficial to be the 1 seed than the 2 seed in regard to a first round matchup.
Well, I mean, look, the Pacers have a 2-game lead over Boston right now for the number 4 seed. And
they play each other 2 more times, which is fascinating. We already know that the Pacers and Celtics are going to play in the first round. I think, according to ESPN's odds or whatever, that's a 90-something% chance of happening. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of who has home court. the Pacers have that 2-game edge, but they play each other 2 more times, which is fascinating because they know they're going to play each other in the playoffs. They play each other 2 more times, and that could determine home court advantage in that first round, which is important. But they don't necessarily want to give the postseason game plan away in those 2 games, right? So it's kind of fascinating to see, what happens. And one of those games is this week in Boston, so that'll be interesting.
I mean, you have to me, drill down on matchups and look at what advantage you might have. Not so much in a regular season game because it's not a one-off situation in the postseason. I mean, you're talking about.
But you see some playoff preview stuff from possession to possession, just like I was at the Celtics-Sixers game last week on Wednesday, I think it was. And you saw the Sixers continually try to pick on Kyrie Irving defensively. And that's something that's going to happen in the playoff series if those teams were to face each other again in the postseason. So I think, you'll see the same thing in a Celtics-Pacers game this week. Both teams will try to find that defensive weak spot that they can attack and exploit. And that's something. So there will, I think there is, if both teams are healthy, especially, and will have basically the same roster, same rotation as they do in the playoffs, you can really start to see what matchups will favor each team in a regular season game, especially this late in the season when, that you're going to be playing that team in the postseason.
All the Pacers need to do is find somebody to emulate LaMarcus Aldridge's mid-range game. And good grief. They could do. I mean, I know Al Horford was out, but they had nothing for LaMarcus. Yeah. I mean, he lit him up. 48 points on 20 of 31 shooting. And even with the win, the Spurs are still stuck in 8th place right now in the West, which tells you how good the depth is in the West. You're going to win 48 games in the West, and the best you'll be able to do is get 8th maybe.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at that Sixers-Celtics game, and before the game, Brad Stevens was talking about his team's defense, and he says, yeah, you know what? I know we rank 5th offensively or whatever it is, but that's not what I see with my eyes. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was interesting. I was like, oh, really? Like, okay, what is the difference between, the fact that the Celtics rank as a top 5 defensive team and him just not believing in his defense very much? And he talked about it. He basically thinks from possession to possession, they don't stop what they're supposed to be stopping.
That's clear.
Consistently enough. Yeah. And then, they've proved him right because over their 4-game losing streak, their defense has been terrible. Amazingly, they still rank 5th defensively because there's a big drop off between 5th and 6th in defensive efficiency. But, he's right. And I looked at, today I looked at how teams defend versus the league's top 10 offenses. So basically just taking their games against the teams that rank top 10 in offensive efficiency. Mm-hmm. And Boston drops from 5th to 10th, like in that regard. So they're the 10th best defense against the top 10 offenses. And they've lost like 8 of their last 9 games against those teams. So that tells you that their overall ranking defensively is a little inflated.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a matter of they've regressed as collectively on the defensive end. They've got individual guys who just aren't as good on that end of the floor and really haven't been as good overall as they were last year. For that, you can point to whatever reasons you want. I vowed not to dive into the Celtics Cosmos anymore.
We could still talk about them basketball-wise. It's still, even going back like that Indiana-Boston matchup is fascinating because it's a team. One team is vastly more talented, but has not made the most of that talent, and the other team has made the most of what it's got.
Yeah,
sort of like the overachieving versus the overachievers versus the underachievers.
Exactly. But I'm not going to dive into the psychosis of the Celtics any longer. I'm going to let it be. I'm going to move on to the Western Conference.
Just stay away from that. The Lakers.
I don't want to dive into them either, and they're no longer a part of our playoff conversation since they've officially been eliminated. So we can move on. What do you make of the West race tightening up the way it has? The Clippers are up to 5th now with their win over the Knicks, 5-game win streak. I mean, we talked about them with Sean Powell last time here on the Hang Time podcast, but what about the rest of the West construction in terms of the standings? What do you make of where we're at, Shu, with 3 weeks out, and you have kind of this bunch, Oklahoma City, Utah, the Spurs, kind of all bunched in together there at 6 through 8. I'm kind of surprised the Thunder have hit the skids the way they have. I thought they had kind of gotten over this and were in a different space, and here they are right back fighting for their space, with the Jazz and the Spurs.
Yeah, they got a good win in Toronto on Friday, getting back the second game of that home and home. And it was good in the sense that their offense looked pretty good. They hit 23s. It was their best offensive game in a while after a huge slump. Dennis Schroeder had a good game off the bench where he had been pretty terrible since the All-Star break. And so we'll see if that can carry over. Who knows? One game is just one game. So sure. I'm not going to look too much into that. I mean, this thing is wide open. I feel bad for the Western Conference video coordinators because basically, Golden State and Denver tied in the loss column for 1 and 2. Houston and Portland tied in the loss column for 3 and 4. So you can't even and it's not like in the East where who 4 and 5 are, whether they're 4 or 5, and in the East, who's 1, who's 2, who's 3. And Detroit, even though they fell a half game back of Brooklyn for the time being, still looks like the favorite to be the 6th seed. So you can almost pencil in a Sixers-Pistons series.
Right.
In the West, it's wide open. I mean, you don't know who's 1 and 2, you don't know who's 3 and 4, and you don't know who's 5, 6, 7, and 8 in any kind of order. So, anything can fall out. And you don't necessarily believe in many of these teams on the road. Like all of them have, been kind of sketchy on the road. San Antonio, especially, even though they got that win in Boston. And so that's the big thing to me is you look at their schedules and you're I don't know if this team can go out on the road and get a win that they need. I think Oklahoma City still has a 5-game homestand coming up. And that's good for them, though though they have a tough schedule in regard to opponent strength. So anything can happen in my mind. The Warriors have a much easier schedule than the Nuggets going forward. So I would favor them as the 1 seed, but they still play each other. So, anything can happen, really.
Yeah, and the Warriors need to stop playing. Well, after listening to Steve Kerr talk about it, I'm not sure they can stop having those lapses. It's just, he made a great point. I don't know if you saw it, talking about what they've been through in terms of how much basketball they've played, during this run, taking everybody's best shot night after night. He said he was surprised, actually, that they haven't had more of those power outage games where they just don't have the energy and don't have what it takes to get up night after night for opponents who are coming after you like it's their game 7 of a playoff series. I mean, they're catching everybody's best shot, and they don't always muster the proper response. I still think they're going to have what it takes you to flip a switch in the postseason. But how long can you go, in the same state where you just don't have the requisite energy night to night? Like, how do you change that? How do you?
I think they just got to prioritize being healthy in the playoffs. And if that means sitting guys multiple games between now and April 10th, then you do it. They sat Curry the other day and then got smacked by the Mavs, which maybe puts a little notch on Curry's belt as far as a top 5 MVP candidate, just because they have a losing record without him this year. But I think you just, give guys days off. Just tell them, you know what, you're not playing today, and you worry about being healthy and fresh come April 13th, I believe is the first day of the playoffs. Be healthy and fresh for that. Don't worry too much about chemistry with Cousins and or Bogut going forward. Just make sure Curry, Thompson, Durant, Draymond Green, Iguodala, all those guys get plenty of rest between now and the start of the postseason, and keep them fresh. And that should be. And don't worry about the 1 or 2 seed. And you may get the 1 seed anyway because, like I said, you have a much easier schedule than the Nuggets going forward. So prioritize rest over everything, I think.
Is it too soon, or should we even bother relitigating the Rookie of the Year conversation? For so long, it seemed like a foregone conclusion. It's Luka Doncic. It's Luka Doncic. It's Luka Doncic. Then Trae Young, the guy, who's forever tied to Luka, due to that draft night trade that the Mavericks and the Hawks pulled off. Now he's kind of come on, Shu. Had a game winner to beat the Sixers the other night, has played tremendous basketball. Luka had a triple-double in a blowout win for the Mavericks at Oracle. I mean, it's weird. Luka's grind has never really let up this year, but we've kind of moved on from his, nightly highlights and, being blown away by what he's done, and kind of gotten a little recency bias with Trae Young and the Hawks playing better and Trae Young playing much better now than he did early in the year. Is there anything Trae Young can do at this point to change what you put down on your Rookie of the Year ballot?
Probably not. And that's nothing against him. I love watching him play. Like, I could just sit and watch him play pick and roll all night. Like, I can watch a Hawks game, no matter who they're playing, and just see how he plays pick and roll and the angles he finds and the passes that he sees. He's been really, really good and just so much, and has really improved as the season has gone on. I just don't think Doncic has done anything to lose his grip on the trophy, so to speak. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with finishing, with there being two really good guys, and there being a clear 1 and 2 from in my mind. And so, I mean, I still have to, I still haven't dove really hard into the numbers, but from what I see on the surface, I still think it's a Doncic thing. And I will break down some numbers with some of these awards in the next week or two, just going through stats that are relevant for all these award races, and you'll be able to get those on NBA.com and find them on the Twitter account in the next week or two. Like, I haven't dove too deep into the numbers, but I just think Doncic, they both lifted their teams. Actually, both of these teams are improved offensively this year, even though they're both led by rookies, basically. These guys have two of the 10 highest. Doncic, I think, so we have 23 years of sort of play-by-play data. In those 23 years, Doncic is tied for the highest usage rate by a rookie, with Ben Gordon, actually. And then Trae Young is also in the top 10 in that regard, usage rate by a rookie over the last 23 years. So, and both teams have improved offensively, like I said. So these are two rookies that have led their teams in usage rate, and those teams have taken a step forward offensively from last year, which says a lot about both of them, really. And so they're both deserving of the award. I just think Doncic still has the edge.
Right. We'll see. I mean, my ballots are clear right now. I'm going to take a down to the wire approach in terms of I want to take full breadth of the entire season before I go filling out my ballots and thinking about who I'm going to place where. Normally this time you kind of know what's what and what direction you're going in. But I'm gonna wait, and I'm gonna bury myself in the bunker one day and try and hammer them all out.
I think I know who I have number one basically across the board. It's just how I fill out the rest of the ballots, which is important. But I think I'm pretty confident in my top pick for almost every award.
For who wins each one? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
I don't know. I'm debating on a couple. I still have some. Coach of the Year is still on my mind. It's not a ballot of ours necessarily, but it's on my mind.
I think that's the easiest one for me, I think. Yeah. It's too simple. I don't want to make it too complicated. Like,
right.
The Bucks are just so improved on both ends of the floor that you can't vote for anybody. In my mind, you can't vote for anybody other than Budenholzer.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I think actually Defensive Player of the Year is the one that I probably do not have a clear number one pick. And I really have no idea who I'm going to pick at this point. Right. But the other ones I think I'm pretty solid on.
Yeah. Well, we're going to see. I'm going to take it down at least another week or two before I hammer down on those things. Week 24 power rankings are out. Check them out on NBA.com. Top 5 teams this week: the Warriors, Bucks, Rockets, Nuggets, Raptors. If I had to ask you in order of who you think is most capable of winning a championship, would it match the top 5 of your power rankings right now?
Ooh, that's a good question. Warriors 1, yes. Bucks 2, yes. Rockets 3. Yeah, I think that's right. So then Nuggets and Raptors. I might put, if you're just talking about who could win the championship, I might put Toronto over Denver.
Mm-hmm. Would you put the Celtics and/or Sixers over Denver?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably, because I think the East is a little bit more wide open than the West.
Right.
And I'd be fascinated by a Denver-Houston series, obviously, in the conference semifinals. And like we've talked about, I'll be fascinated by every Eastern Conference semifinals matchup. I think Toronto, yes, has the ability. We just don't know. Like, we just don't have the data with Toronto to know what they're capable of and who they are. It's just because Kawhi Leonard has missed so many games and Kyle Lowry has missed a bunch of games, and they just got Marc Gasol, and then Ibaka got suspended for 3 games, and it's like they had a full roster against Charlotte on Sunday, basically for like the second or third, maybe the first time since they made the Gasol trade.
Mm-hmm.
But then Lowry tells us he's not 100%, right? And so,
stunner.
Yeah, so who knows, like what they have. And the same thing with Philly, really. Like their starting lineup has barely played. I don't think it's played 10 games together yet.
Yeah.
And because Embiid was out for so long after the All-Star break. And so I think the Bucks are the one team we could be most confident in the East, but then again, they've lost a couple of guys to injuries. So, and Antetokounmpo is dealing with his own ankle issue that caused a scare this weekend. So it is pretty wide open, I think, beyond the Warriors on both sides.
I mean, say the crazy thing happens. Say the Warriors get knocked out.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And then is it a free for all in terms of it could be either side? It could be,
I mean, if you tell me Malcolm Brogdon's going to be healthy by the conference semifinals,
mm-hmm.
then I would definitely say the Bucks are my second pick beyond Golden State. But we don't know that at this point.
We have no idea. Yeah. Take me through the tiers then, Shu, in the power rankings. We got that first 5. Give me the second tier and on down to the teams that are still.
Yeah, even within that first 5, I think it's Golden State, Milwaukee, and Houston, 1, 2, 3, and then I think Denver and Toronto are sort of their next tier.
Mm-hmm.
Portland and Philadelphia, 6 and 7, I think is
their own.
Yeah, Portland level. Being the clear fourth best team in the West, and Philadelphia being that potential conference winner in the East.
Mm-hmm.
That obviously has the potential to beat anybody in the East, but just hasn't been consistent enough, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got the Clippers, the Spurs, the Jazz, and the Thunder all lumped together basically. And I don't think any of those teams. I mean, the Spurs have a little bit of the Clippers probably have the best momentum of those teams, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything once we get to the playoffs.
Right.
And then you have Indiana and Boston in their own tier. We've talked about that, the underachievers versus the overachievers. And then you have the Miami, Brooklyn, Detroit, Sacramento group. Sacramento, the one team that's not making the playoffs, but just throw them in the mix. I think they're obviously above every other team in the West, and throw them in the mix with those East teams near the bottom of the playoff picture. Orlando and Charlotte, that next group battling for East playoff team position, and then it doesn't matter after that, basically. So that's our top 19. No, it does. Seriously, like none of these teams. Some of these teams have let go of the rope. Let's be honest. Beyond that, and so the way I rank them now, it's just like whatever. Like it's just all right. Maybe one team has a spoiler win or whatever this week, but really, like some of them have. You just have Minnesota, the Lakers, Washington, Atlanta, New Orleans. Like some of these teams are veteran teams that have let go of the rope. Some of them are young teams that are a little bit frisky, but like they're all in the same sort of morass of teams. So so it's fairly basic. The Miami, Brooklyn, Detroit group at the bottom of the East, I still think is above the Orlando, Charlotte group, even though Orlando and Charlotte have both strung together some wins to stay alive, basically.
Right.
Orlando has a huge week this week with road games at Miami and at Detroit this week.
Yeah.
And so it's a huge week for them. They're trying to end the longest playoff drought in the Eastern Conference, and this is the week they've got to win some games to get it done.
Right. I know they're your team to watch. My team to watch this week is Houston. They got 2 extremely interesting games. Not as impactful maybe as what Orlando's dealing with, because we know Houston's in the playoffs already. But just looking at their schedule and you say what games stick out to you on a week, in a given week. Houston at Milwaukee Tuesday night on TNT at 8:00 Eastern.
MVP showcase, right?
MVP showcase, and just a very interesting, as it pertains to our early conversation. If the Warriors were somehow to get knocked out of the mix, and you could potentially have a finals preview of these two, I would be very curious to watch how they match up on Tuesday night.
I was looking at their first matchup, and it was Bledsoe that guarded Harden most, but Brogdon guarded him almost an equal amount of possessions. So that will be missing. I guess George Hill is going to come in and fill some of that role.
Yeah. The second matchup for Houston this week that's really intriguing to me, Denver at Houston, 8 o'clock Eastern on NBA TV Thursday night. To me, everything for Denver is now a measuring stick game when you play another elite team, even if it's just to prove to yourself that you're serious and that you belong. But that's one where you look and say, all right, if Houston's roster is kind of relatively healthy to what we project for them in the playoffs, and Denver is trying to poke their chest out and see where they fit, this is a great opportunity late in the regular season to kind of see where you stand.
Yeah, I was like, man, I don't know if I've seen a Denver-Houston game this year. They've played 3 times already. Houston won the first 2 in November and January, and then Denver won on February 1st at home. And so I'm kind of fascinated to see them play because I don't remember I don't remember those 3 games. And they're obviously looking like the 2 and 3 seeds in the West, and potentially facing each other in the conference semifinals. And so I'll be watching that one.
I haven't placed a ton of importance on each and every other game that I looked at, and I always look at this entire week schedule trying to pick out which games are like, I got to make sure I'm locked in on this one. Boston at Brooklyn Saturday night does stick out to me as one that could be telling. Just based on how Brooklyn would match up against the Celtics in that game, and whether or not we could tell anything else about the Celtics and their shortcomings from a chemistry standpoint. That you never know with the Celtics. That's the kind of game they get it for and would put lumps on Brooklyn. Or they could get run out of it. You just never know.
Yeah, I mean, Brooklyn got the 2 wins they needed last week at Sacramento and at the Lakers. And then now they have 7 straight games basically against teams ahead of them in the standings. And maybe that Boston game at home looks like right now it looks like a much more winnable game than it did, a week or 2 ago.
Right.
In that stretch. And so that may be a game that they see as the most gettable, I guess, of their next stretch of games.
Who'd have thunk we'd be this deep in the season and the Celtics would be counted as like a potential winnable game for somebody like that?
It's crazy. We're less than 3 weeks of the playoffs, and this team still hasn't sort of figured itself out.
I love it. I love the drama. I do love the madness, to borrow a phrase from our collegiate friend, that Jeremy Lamb shot. There's so much basketball floating around right now at all levels. I don't know how we get through the month of March and survive to April just to have the energy to continue to stay locked in. It helps, obviously, to have the power rankings every Monday to kind of keep us in line, give us the guideposts we need to stay on track. You can check those out on NBA.com every Monday, every day, but they come out fresh on Mondays thanks to John Schumann and his hard work. Shu, I'm gonna like I said, I'm gonna digest this Tuesday night matchup, this MVP showdown, and some other games before we get back on Thursday. And I want you to please start your awards number crunching, because I'm gonna need some help filling out my ballots. So it would be helpful if you got all your business done ahead of time.
Oh, I'm gonna present the numbers and allow other people to sort of add their own context, or I'm going to present the numbers as they are. Basically that's it. Like
the Schumann report. Let us make up our own mind.
Yeah, for like most improved, it'll be like, okay, who's the most improved in terms of just points, rebounds, and assists per game or per 36 minutes? Who's the most improved as far as shooting? Who's the most improved as far as assist ratio? Who's the most improved in just all that kind of stuff. And see, and see what names pop up more than once. That's basically how I look at it. And then the same thing with, 6-man, what 6-man is the best shooter? What 6-man is the best, leads the league in assists off the bench or plus minus off the bench, and all that type of stuff. I mean, just sort of throw it all together and basically see what names pop up the most.
Let the data speak for itself. No question. All right. Well, look, appreciate your work on the power rankings. Get your nap I know it's time for the
It's
Monday
coming.
afternoon nap. We'll be back Thursday with another episode. Be sure to subscribe to Hang Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts for new episodes all season long. Please leave a review. Do us that one favor. And for John Schumann, our producer John Hartzell, this is Sekou Smith. We will see you right here next time on the Hang Time Podcast.